Hi, I'm Carl Franklin. In this episode of Blazor Train, I'll show you a couple more advanced MVVM examples with more of a real-world approach. First, we'll create a business object layer between the view model and the models, making it MVBOVM, or from top layer to bottom, VVMBOM, VivMBOM. View model, business object model. You heard it here first.
Oh my God!
Next, I'll show you how to update a view model property that's computed from another process using some simple eventing. The result is a completely isolated code-free view that updates when any business object property changes. What could be sweeter? Don't answer that. And that's all coming up right now, right here on Blazor Train. So before I show you the code, I thought I would show you the app and what it looks like when it's done. And we're going to build it piece by piece, okay? So it's a shopping cart, and I've got some products in my shopping cart. And it doesn't show the quantities and the prices and all that, but I have this computed value. Right? So I have a method in my view model that when I call that method, it goes through all of the items in the cart with the products and their prices, adds them all up, and then gives you this sentence. Your cart contains 3 of left-handed thingamabob at an item cost of $9.99, 1 of a 5.4 millimeter Scring Daddy at an item cost of $1.99, and 2 of small black Poppy Doppy at an item cost of $3.99. The total is $39.94. Now I've also got this test right here, update models, and all I'm doing is I'm going into the first product, left-handed thingamabob, and I'm going to up the item cost by $1. So when I click this, you'll see this change from $9.99 to $10.99. Boom. And you can also see that the entire total changes by $1. There you go. So this is happening from the view model, so it's easy to do. But what if I want to bind to one of the products directly and say, change the price? Or what if I want to bind to one of these items and change the quantity, right? So that's going to require a little notification, a little magic that goes on behind the scenes, but I'll show you how to do that. The end result is that if I click on this, I can change the product price and everything should update. So I'm just going to change it from $1.99 to $4. And this is the second guy. So watch this change from $1.99 to $4. Boom. Just like that. And the computed value, the string, changes as well. So that's what we're going to do. So here's a brand new Blazor server application in Visual Studio called MVVM Test 2. We're going to start from scratch here. I'm going to start with my models. So I'll create a models folder. And to the models folder, I'm going to add 4 models. First one is product. Product has an ID, a name, a description, and a price. Next is customer. Customer has an ID, first name, and a last name. Next is cart item. Cart item has an ID, a product ID, and a quantity. And finally, the cart itself. So the cart has an ID, a customer ID, and a list of cart items. Now these are very plain data models, but that's the point. We want these data models to persist via an API layer so we can save them, update them, retrieve them, delete them, all of that stuff. Now what we're going to do, rather than use these directly in the view model and put all the business logic in the view model, I'm going to create another layer called business models. And so these are business objects where they're going to inherit from these data models, but then we can override properties, we can add methods, we can do whatever it is we need to do in there to add some logic to these basic data models. So I'm going to create a folder named business models. And to this folder, I'm going to add 4 business models that inherit from the 4 models that I've just created. So here's the convention I'm using. I'm going to call the first one product model, and it inherits from product. So that's basically it. I'm taking my base class, I'm adding model to the end of the name of the class. You can do whatever you do, I don't care. This is the way I did it. So there's nothing in here yet, but we are getting set up to add the logic that we need as we develop the app. All right, so now let's add a customer model. There you go. Also, nothing in here yet, but there will be. Now, before we go any further, I'm going to add a data service to my data folder. And the reason is I want a place where I can get a collection of customers and products that otherwise might be in a database that I can access through an API layer. So it's sort of just a faux API layer. It's a service. It's just going to return my collections. But I want it outside of the view models. I want it outside of the business models, someplace where there can be one source of data. Okay? So let's add that to the data folder. Data service. I don't know. It just came to me. So this is just a demo. It's a repository for data. I don't have all the CRUD stuff on here. I'm just hanging off two lists, one of product model, one of customer model, and we're just adding some seed data to it. So I've got 3 products. First one is a left-handed thingamabob. Second one is a 5.4 millimeter Scring Daddy. And the third one is a small black Poppy Doppy. Okay, now I've got my 3 customers, Isadora Jar, Ben Slacken, and Mike Easter, my 3 favorite people in the whole world. Okay, let's continue with the business models. I'll add a cart item model. And now you can really see where we start customizing these business models. We would normally use an API service, but instead I'm injecting, for lack of a better word, I'm actually putting in the constructor a data service. And now it's time for the first tip. You can override base properties and methods with the new keyword. You can see public new int product ID. So the reason I want to do this is because I want to create a product and hang the product off of this class as well. So this is the cart item model. If you look at cart item, so I have a product ID in a quantity, but what I want to do is add a product to it because that's going to have the information I need in the UI. So anytime I add a product ID to the cart item model, it's going to pull out the product with that ID, and that will be available to us in the UI. I've also got a total that I'm calculating, and I've just added this, calculating this based on the quantity and multiply it by the price. So that's a total for this cart item. So essentially I've got a product, I've got a quantity, I multiply those two things together, the product price by the quantity, I've got a total for this line item. Make sense?
No.
I thought so. So here's the next one. Cart model. So with cart model, we're going to override the items property. So if you look in cart, in the base class, remember we have this list of cart item, and that's great. But what I want to do is override the items and make it a list of cart item model. So again, that new keyword lets me essentially override it. Okay? So here's my list of items. I'm going to return that, and I'm just setting items value. And the only reason I'm overriding is so I can change that type. Now I've also added a total to the cart, which is going to go through all the items and call the total and add it up. Also notice that total here is not a method that returns a value. It's a property with a getter. It's a read-only property. And whenever you're using view models or MVVM, it's best if you can make everything a property, even if it's just a read-only property, so that binding will work really well. All right, now that we have those, let's go to our startup and add the data service. So we get access to that. Now it's time for the view model. Now, remember I told you before that a view model is there to support a view. So in this case, our view is going to be index razor. So I'm going to create an index view model in the view models folder. All right, so we've got our data service that we inject. And now I'm basically setting up the data as it would exist if I'm just coming into this mid-app. I don't have any CRUD buttons to add and remove items to the shopping cart. You know, we're going to assume that the user already has some items in their shopping cart. So we're just picking the first customer. Customer ID is 1. And this is the shopping cart is a cart model, right? And then for the items, we're adding a new cart item model, passing in the data service, and we're setting ID is 1, product ID is 1, the first product, quantity 3. The next one is the second product ID, quantity 1, and the third one is the third product ID, quantity 2. So this just gets us into a state where we can show something on the screen. Remember, this view model is here to support the view. Also remember that button, Update Models, that added $1 to the first product. There it is right there. Data service products 0. In other words, the first product, price, plus equals, which means add to it $1. Now to use MVVM, remember, we want to inject the view model not directly, but by interface. That's right. So how I'm going to do that is generate an interface. I'm going to click on the class name, press Control-R, Control-I, and this will extract an interface. And you get the choice of excluding members from the interface or not. I'm just going to use the default and say OK. And so what this did is it created an interface right there, iIndex view model, in the view models folder that has the interface for it. Now we're going to go back to startup and we will add the view model as a service. Now before we can change the index page, we have to add a couple of using statements to imports, right? We need the models folder, the business models folder, and the view models folder. Now let's change up index to support that view model. All right, so right here I'm injecting by interface the index view model, and I'm looping through each of the shopping cart items, okay? And I'm showing just in an unordered list here, item quantity of item product name, item product price, each equals, and then item total. So this is not the demo that you saw before. This is, we're working towards it, all right? And then we have a total. Here's my button, Update Models. When I click it, it's calling on the view model that Update Models method. And if you recall, let's go to that view model. Update Models is just public void, just like you would have a button click handler, public void, no problem. So let's see what stage 1 or step 1 of this app looks like. There's not much there, but it does do the calculations, right? And does the total. Now watch what happens if I update the models. Remember, it's going to increase this guy by $1. There it is. And the total updates and everything else is the same. And this works well because we are updating from the view model itself. That's why all the binding, works. But it's that computed value that we're going to have trouble with. So let's change the demo to add that computed value and what's involved and what's necessary to bubble back to the view model when changes happen, such as product price, that aren't initialized directly from the view model, but instead are bound into the view. So we're going to change product model first, because that's where the price is. Now here's what I've done. I've added a public event action, state changed, and I've got this method, notify state changed, that invokes that event if it's not null. All right. So now I've overridden the price property so we can raise that state changed event. And yes, you'll have to do this in any property of any business model that you want to trigger a change. So right there, after I set the base price equal to the value, I call notify state changed. Now, how do I handle that in the view model? Well, that's next. So let's go to the interface of the view model. We'll change that first. So we've added 4 items here. One is because we're going to use a select element in the UI, we've got a select cart item model method that accepts the change event args. So essentially we can bind on change to that. And then we've also got a selected cart item model. And so that is when we click on an item in the list box, that will become the selected cart item model. All right. And then we can bind to the properties of that. Now we've got a computed value as a string and update computed value as a method. So now let's change the view model. Because we're going to have to hook that event, we need dispose. We need a dispose method. In other words, at the end of the life of this view model, this dispose method down here at the very bottom will fire where we can unhook the event. So let's talk about hooking the event right now. I have changed this code right here that adds items to call a method that I've created below called add cart item. And we're creating a new cart item based on not a cart item model, just a new cart item. Okay. Data, remember data is going to come from an API, and we're going to call add cart item here. Finally, we're going to call update computed value, which puts that string together. So here's my add cart item. So we have to create a cart item model passing the data service from this cart item, right? So we're just doing that by changing the properties. I could do it by passing in, if I wanted to, passing in an item. But now we're going to hook that product state change. And that's why we had to use an item cart model, because we needed a product property. And when that product state change happens, I want this to fire. And no matter what the item is, I want to update the computed value right from there. And in delete cart item, I've also unhooked the event with minus equals before removing it from the collection. Right? My shopping cart and update models stay the same. Here's my selected cart item model. It's just a public property. Here's my select cart item model that happens when I click in the list box or the select. And I'm just going to pull that out from the shopping cart items. Now again, the reason that I do this is there might be a situation in which the model is changing, the business model is changing. Maybe one business model is changing another business model. Maybe there's some direct binding that's going on. But your app needs to know. Your app needs to get notified when those changes happen in order to propagate them, right? The view model doesn't do state has changed, right? All it does is it updates the properties. And because those properties are bound directly to the UI, they will change. So here's what this does. Your cart contains, and now it goes through the shopping cart items, puts together a string that you can now show as the computed value. Now the last piece is index razor. We need to change that because we've got some more UI here. So the first thing I've done is change that unordered list to a select. And I've set on change. That happens when I click an item to index view model, select cart item model. And now I'm going through my shopping cart items and I'm just showing the name. And I have my total right there. And now I'm checking to see if selected cart item model is not null. And if it isn't null, I'm allowing the user to change the price, and I have the product name there. And I'm binding with an input. You can see right here, type number. I'm binding to index view model selected cart item model product.price. And I'm also setting the bind event to on input. So every keystroke will update that product's price. Now what's going to happen, of course, is that the product model price is going to fire, right? We're going to set this, and then notify state change is going to happen. Then in the index view model, this will fire, and we're going to call update computed value, which changes the computed value. And because that's a property that's bound, we're going to see the value right there. Now, just to show you that without this notify state changed, it wouldn't work properly, I'm going to comment that out and run it. And here we go. I'm going to click on 4.5 millimeter Screen Daddy, and I'm going to change that from 199 to 3. Now you're going to see this update because it's bound, but you're not going to see this computed value update. Watch. All right. So that updated because I changed the price to 3, but this is still 199 because I have to call that, update computed value in order for that string to be generated. But here's the deal. Make this notify state changed call. Now I'll change this to 3 and watch this. There it is. Now we're happy. Everything works. Everybody's happy. It's a little bit of an extra mile that you have to go to, but hey, this is the real world. This is the way software is written. Well, that's it for MVVM Part 2. Back to you in the studio, Carl. When I first saw MVVM, it looked like a lot of extra code that I didn't want to write. I ignored it. Then I had the task of refactoring a customer's app, which was done the easy way, to a robust N-tier web application with many layers. And that's the day that I embraced MVVM, and I haven't looked back. And with Blazor's amazing binding model, you can MVVMify a Blazor app quickly and easily. Hey, thanks for riding the rails with me today. This is where I jump off. I'll see you next time. Blaze a train!